Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan, news correspondent with the Irish Farmers Journal. Coming up on the show this week.
But I will put my credentials up front against any evaluation of anybody else in terms of looking after those who are most marginalised. We introduced and paid by coincidence through this crisis for the first time a sheep subsidy of €10 per ewe. That wasn't there before.
A heated late-night exchange in the Dáil as Minister Creed defends his position on the fodder crisis against a Fianna Fáil motion.
Minister, if you think that you've done a good job in dealing with the fodder crisis, then I would hate to see what a bad job looks like. Because I think everybody in this chamber, apart from yourself, will agree that we now have what is a crisis situation, which could have been cut off at the pass, which could have been dealt with earlier, but you refuse to do so.
Deputy Lisa Chambers there. Plus, we'll have a favourite topic of conversation amongst farmers as Dáil Evans reports from the Met Eireann, the Wind That Shakes the Island conference.
It was exciting, but also scary as well, because we were trying to work out what was actually going to happen, and we really wanted to kind of make sure that the message got out and that the right message was going to get out.
Met Eireann's Liz Walsh, and yes, that was disco music you could hear in the background of that clip. I now know why my colleague Dáil put dibs on that conference. But first, for many farmers, the fodder crisis remains very real, with farmers in parts of the country counting down the remaining days until they can get stock out. Fianna Fáil has brought forward a motion that would see the immediate rollout of low-interest loans promised in Budget 2018, meal vouchers and a hardship fund to help deal with credit pressure as farmers count the cost of spring. The agriculture spokesperson for Fianna Fáil, Charlie McConalogue, told me his party's thinking behind Minister Creed's response to the fodder crisis before the motion went to the Dáil on Tuesday.
Deputy McConalogue, we're here outside the Dáil and you've just given a press conference there on the fodder crisis, but Minister Creed in response has said that if he'd brought in fodder imports sooner he would have been ridiculed by the co-ops. What do you think of that?
Well, I didn't hear anyone at any stage tell the Minister to import fodder back in February or March, and I'm not quite sure who he's referring to there. I think the Minister is, as I said at all stages, unfortunately scrambling to try and defend what is a very indefensible position in relation to the total lack of leadership he's given on this issue. What I certainly called for, and what the farming organisations were calling for from the Minister, was that he would acknowledge in advance of a few months ago that there was a fodder crisis looming, that it was going to be very acute in the event that we had a late spring, and that in order to ensure that we try to avoid that scenario, he should have introduced a meal voucher in those areas where the fodder crisis was most acute. Instead, he chose to actually move fodder from one part of the country to the other. And we now find that those parts of the country, and particularly the south, where the fodder was taken from, are actually the areas that are in the most acute need and in the most difficulty. So the Minister, back a couple of months ago, should have introduced a meal voucher and should have stopped being in denial and recognised the situation facing the farming community. And then, of course, the other thing he should have done, and which I said to him at the end of March, was that he needed to be prepared and have contingency plans in place for a fodder import scheme if the weather did not improve and if we actually indeed landed in the middle of a late spring, and that if he had those contingency plans in place, he would have been ready to press go and start importing when it became clear that was needed. Unfortunately, because he was in denial, he wasn't in any way prepared, and he had to scramble then, whenever in the middle of the crisis, to actually put together a fodder import scheme. And we saw how haphazard that was, because initially when he announced the terms of it, it was only confined to the dairy co-ops, when in fact it was required through feed merchants and all co-ops. So that was a sign that the Minister was making it up on the go at that stage rather than having been prepared for it in advance. So that's what he should have done. And unfortunately, certainly I would agree with him, importing fodder in February would not have been the correct approach, but there was a correct approach which he should have taken and which he didn't take, and which has led to a much more acute problem now than otherwise might have been the case.
And last question, obviously credit is becoming an increasing concern now for farmers, and you've suggested that a hardship fund be put in place. Would this hardship fund be funded from de minimis funding, or where would that be coming from?
Yes, it would have to be under de minimis, and we believe that there is the capacity within the Department of Agriculture. There is an ongoing underspend, so and the amount of funding we're talking about is small, so it's very much doable if the will is there. But it's needed now, and it's needed immediately, because it's the next 2 weeks, hopefully not any longer than that, but certainly the next 2 weeks, where farmers are going to be under the most acute financial pressure and mental strain, and where they need that support. So we need to see that from the Minister, and hopefully he will listen. I expect to get very widespread support from our motion in the Dáil tonight, and likewise in the Shannon, where Senator Paul Daly has tabled a motion on behalf of the party, and we hope that the Minister will, on foot of that, actually respond with the additional measures that are required to support farmers.
Fianna Fáil's Charlie McConalogue there. But the Minister for Agriculture, Michael Creed, clearly did not agree with the deputies in opposition that night.
But I will put my credentials up front against any evaluation of anybody else in terms of looking after those who are most marginalised. We introduced, and paid by coincidence through this crisis for the first time, a sheep subsidy of €10 per ewe. That wasn't there before, and it was a commitment from this side of the House to acknowledge a sector that faced particular challenges. In terms of the 25 million additional monies, which will be paid later this year, I acknowledge, in terms of restoring cuts that were imposed by others in ANC, we have skewed that payment deliberately towards smaller farmers. So I don't surrender one iota in terms of the credentials of this party, myself individually, or this government in terms of trying to look after rural communities and farmers. Now, there are issues, and while I do take the point on board by Deputy Kinney and suggested by others, and there's uncomfortable messages here in terms of climate change. Deputy Smith and Deputy Ryan make that point. We are dealing with the visual personification of that challenge. And it's uncomfortable, and it's something we will have to deal with. And I'm committed to bringing together all of the aforementioned stakeholders so that we can put in place the appropriate steps. And some of those will be steps that my department will have to acknowledge, Teagasc will have to acknowledge, co-ops will have to acknowledge, individual farmers will have to acknowledge that they have all individual roles to play. This isn't a simplistic issue of saying we're overstocked. And Deputy Collins, I'm disappointed with you that you would stand here in the elected Parliament of the House and say cattle are dying in West Cork of hunger and starvation. They are not. They are not. The figures that are available, Deputy Collins, the figures that are available, the figures that are available, Deputy, for January and February of this year show a small increase on January and February of 2017, but are actually lower than January and February of 2016. For March, we acknowledge there has been a surge, but it is not because of cattle dying of starvation, and that is an unfortunate message that you are sending to I don't want to dwell on the point, but it is a shameful message to be sending.
Minister Creed there. Well, from the heated exchanges of the Dáil to the sunny climes of Brazil, Jim Nicholson was the only Irish MEP to be part of an EU delegation to the South American country recently. And our correspondent, Phelim O'Neill, asked Mr Nicholson if he'd been impressed by it.
No, I come back and my view would be we overlooked them to our peril in the longer term. They have come 10 years since I was there. They have come a long way. Even in that time I could see that. They are using science, they're using every aspect of modern technology and agriculture to develop these large farms, which they are using to export to the rest of the world. And that is, in my opinion, is where their strength, they hope their strength will be. They have many problems, of course, and they have problems not only in the beef sector, poultry sector, and now we understood we were there, they have also problems and controls on the fish sector. So they're not without their problems, and they quite clearly are, in my opinion, and it's only my opinion, but I think others would have had the same view as me, they are probably still a very protectionist country. And while they say they are open to business and everything else, they are always open to export their beef, but they don't really want to take anything back, and that I think is going to be their weakness. You had a fairly prolonged meeting with the Minister of Agriculture and you also had the opportunity to visit some farms. Did you put it to the Minister, that there has been an issue of product coming into Europe, and the European, when they've done the veterinary inspections of Brazil, they've had a series of negative reports out. Did you put that to the Minister? Yes, we did, and they of course say they're putting it right. They're putting all controls in place that will meet whatever conditions that have to be met. But, as I said to them, we were here 10 years ago and you still have a problem, so 10 years on, they still have a problem. But I have to give it to the Minister. He spent close to 4 hours with us answering questions. He never ducked, he never dived. And he sat there taking it all, and I have to say, giving it back at the same time. It was quite a tough meeting we had, but that's the way it should be, and they accept that. They call it, while we call it the rotten beef thing, they call it lousy beef. And if I heard once from many more politicians in Brazil that we were making mountains out of molehills, I think I would have screamed. But they're entitled to make their defence.
Well, what was their pushback on us? Did they say that did they have a pushback to say we have our problems in Europe at all? Did they give you any feedback there?
Of course, immediately the first pushback is horse meat. You had your horse meat problem. You had your BSE problem. You've had problems in Europe, and my response is always, yes, we've had them, but we move immediately to put them right, and you don't come back in 10 years and you still have problems there.
Tell me, you said you spent time on a farm as well. What's the typical Brazilian farm like that, based on what you've seen and what you visited?
Well, the farm that they brought us to, and you wouldn't expect them to bring them to the worst farm. It was probably one of the best farms that they have in Mato Grosso. And Mato Grosso, as a province within Brazil, is larger, I think, than the whole of the United Kingdom. So it's a massive area. They're farming. They're very clear. They're farming around about 38%. The rest is all preserved land, but what I've seen when you're standing, as far as the eye can see, you can just see a situation whereby they can grow 2 crops in 1 year. They start off with their top profit making is cotton, followed by maize, soya, and then beef.
So beef is fourth priority?
I think basically. Beef would be about their fourth priority because it's produced on the soil that's not the top soil. But again, having said that, I have to say, I stood in the field and the guy told me that they reseeded the field 32 days ago. It was about 8 inches long and there was about 150, 200 beef animals on it. So, there is no comparison. They have the economy of scale, they have the climate, so we don't talk about that, but they don't have the control.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Now, Ireland's water quality was under the spotlight this week, and agriculture felt the heat as it was revealed that farming caused up to 53% of the pollution in waterways that were categorised as at risk. A fresh interdepartmental approach to inspections is being taken looking at water quality, with farmers who have never or rarely been inspected highlighted as being prioritised for local authority inspections. But it's all part of trying to save our green image and continue to drive Irish exports under Foodwise 2025. Inspections bad, but exports good. I spoke to Jack Nolan from the Nitrates Division at the department about what this means for farmers.
What's happened is that the Department of Housing and Planning and ourselves, along with industry, have come together to fund free advisors that are going to be going onto farms from this summer onwards to give advice in areas that are either at risk from deteriorating water quality or else are already at a high status and we want to keep the status good. And the idea is that industry and ourselves working together will be taking a new approach to improving water quality. So as well as having regulation in place, as well as having our knowledge transfer schemes, as well as having GLOS, we also have an innovative, collaborative approach.
And I think we said it was around 2.1 million a year up to 2021 that's going to be invested from the co-ops, from the Department of Agriculture and Department of Housing. So how many advisors is that now?
That's 30 advisors in total, but that's the scheme taken on its own. But as well as that, the co-ops have said, certain co-ops have said that within their ranks, they will actually have more advisors than this in place. And outside of that, we'll also be training other advisors. So, say, the private advisors in the country will also be given more regular updates. There'll be community events so that people are more aware of the impact that they're having on water in their locality. There's an excellent website for people that are interested from the EPA called catchments.ie, where you can log on and see the water quality in your local area. And people, generally speaking, know what's affecting water quality or have an idea. But we must remember that as farmers, the actions we take every day have an impact on the environment around us.
And I suppose one thing my neighbours are talking about at home is when they can get out and do some spraying because the land is saturated at the minute. I mean, pesticides, are they an issue now for water quality?
Pesticides are a real live issue and something that people have to be very aware of. If you look at the EPA report last year, it showed that there are issues with MCPA, particularly in May and September when people are going onto what are heavier ground and using it to remove rushes. So very, very careful management is needed because a very small amount can contaminate a huge length of waterway.
And I guess our derogation, it's precious to us, the permission that we have at the minute from the EU. I mean, what are they looking at? How are we going to keep that going forward?
The only way we're going to keep it in the future is if we continue to protect water quality and actually improve it. Because when we go to negotiate with the Commission, what they're most interested in is what impact is agriculture having on water quality. And while we've been doing well since about 2006, in the last monitoring period, 2012-2015, we saw a 3% fall off in good status. And everybody is aware that we've had a 300,000 cow increase in a 300,000 increase in dairy cows over the past couple of years. And for people looking in from the outside, they must wonder what's happening here. We also sell over 90% of our agricultural produce abroad under the banner of Origin Green, with very strong sustainability claims. And in order to back those up, we have to be seen to be constantly improving water quality, improving our protection of the environment. If you look at biodiversity, for example, only 9% of the habitats in the country are at good status. Of the species that are protected across Europe, only 50% are at good status in Ireland. If you look at ammonia, 2 weeks ago the EPA released a report saying that we exceeded the ceiling for 2016. So there are issues that need to be dealt with in agriculture. And what we want as an industry is for everyone to work together. So that means the farming organisations, the farmers themselves, industry, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Housing and Chagascan advisors, to show farmers ways that we can keep making progress together, because that's what it's about. We're not going to solve everything in the morning, but as long as we can be seen to be making progress and changing behaviour on farms, we'll be given an opportunity to improve.
So going forward then up to 2021, what are we looking at? Are we looking at events? Are we looking at increased awareness in GLOS training? Are we looking at regulation and inspections? I mean, what should farmers be looking for?
Well, there are a series of initiatives already in place. For example, if you take last year, we had the Year of Sustainable Grassland by the Department of Agriculture. We know that the average production of grass per hectare of grass in Ireland is around 4 or 5 tonnes, whereas it could be above 10 at least. And that's something major. If farmers change practice, one of the ways I'd suggest straight away is that people get a soil test done. It costs between €15-25 and see how much lime do you need, because using lime on its own can increase the efficiency of use of phosphorus by 50%. For the specific programme we're talking about here, that's going to complement what we already have in place. So we have our farmers in GLOS, we have our knowledge transfer programme, we have the inspections which will keep going. What we're going to have here will be a series of community events which will bring people together, not just farmers, but all those in the community that are using and enjoying and benefiting from the good water quality in Ireland, such as tourist operators and so on. And then these advisors will go out to farmers after streams and rivers have been walked by local authority staff, and it's actually identified what is the problem. If there is a problem, who is causing it? So it's not a blame game, but it's just saying to people, look, we can see there's an issue here and we'll help you. We'll help you to change. So this is what we suggest you do here. And hopefully this is a pilot programme that's going to last for 4 years, but it's something that we think needs to be given a chance and given encouragement from all the stakeholders, mainly the farmers themselves. They need to buy into it, support it and take part fully.
That was Jack Nolan there. Stay tuned, because still to come we have a conference/disco with Met Eireann and Ryanair boss Michael O'Leary on his upcoming Angus sale at Gigginstown.
Crackdown on access to marts. In this week's Irish Farmers Journal, find out if you will have restricted access to your mart. Dáil meets today to vote on introducing additional fodder supports for struggling farmers. Find out which dairy co-op is entering merger talks. Department gets tough on farm water inspections. Plus, we've an exclusive interview with Ryanair's Michael O'Leary, who talks to us on vegans, farm subsidies, and if he will be encouraging his children to take up farming. Inside this week's Irish Farmers Journal, on sale today.
We've had Storm Ophelia, Storm Emma and a slew of weather and wind warnings in between over this winter period. Our correspondent Dáil Evans travelled to the eye of the storm, or less dramatically Met Eireann's conference, and spoke to one of their chief meteorologists, Evelyn Cusack, about just how bad the weather had been this year.
Oh yeah, no, it has been much wetter than average and also colder than average. Whether it's part of any trend or not, it's impossible to say, because we do get huge variability in the weather at our latitudes, but certainly it has been an exceptionally, as I said, cold and overall wet winter. But and then spring was very dry and cold, has been so far. So, you know, extremes at all ends.
Yeah. And can we expect to see more sort of snowfall type events, or is that just way out for us?
Well, it's really impossible to say. Funny enough, we're not funny enough. There's likely to be slightly more precipitation, but it's sort of counterintuitive that maybe as the climate gets warmer that we would get more snowfall. But the reason for that is that if there's more moisture in the air, more precipitation, and if that meets very cold air, then you get more snow, which is actually what happened in Ireland as the warm air came up associated with Storm Emma, hit the Siberian air that was down over Ireland. So we got very heavy snow, even though the climate is getting a little bit warmer. It seems a little bit counterintuitive.
And finally, technology is improving all the time. Is that going to improve the accuracy of our weather forecast?
Well, hopefully, yeah. As
That's
I
the
said,
intention.
and it has enormously. As I said, when I started first, the forecasts were just about 1 to 2 days ahead. So we have some degree of confidence in about a week to 10 days at the moment. Now, we're never going to get perfect forecasts because the weather is far too variable at our latitudes, but hopefully it will continue to improve. And really that's why Met Eireann is in existence, to provide timely and accurate weather forecasts and warning for the citizen, obviously for the farmer, and in order to protect life, property and to prevent damage.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Now, you might know Michael O'Leary as the boss of Ryanair and last week's winner of the Aintree Grand National. But he's also a man with a passion for pedigree Angus cattle. As a woman with a passion for pedigree Hereford cattle, my co-workers, with their usual wry sense of humour, decided that I should be the one to interview him about his upcoming Angus sale at Jigginstown Stud.
Well, my grandparents were dairy farmers in Cork, just outside Kanturk, in a place called Castlemagner. They gradually, though, all moved into bloodstock, or out of dairy and into bloodstock. And my dad was always, if anything, was the original kind of suckler farmer. Like when we were growing up on 60, 80, 100 acres. And he always had dry cows. He made the mistake of everybody else in those days, though. He'd buy them in March, April, graze the land and sell them in September, October when everybody was selling them. So he'd buy high and sell low.
Growing up, did you want to be a farmer or did you want to be a businessman? What came first? Did you always have in the back of your head you wanted to farm?
No, growing up, like everybody else, I wanted to be a footballer. Unfortunately, I wasn't good enough. I never wanted to be a farmer. Like my brother was the farmer, always growing up. I think I always wanted to be doing nice, clean work. I think I was always going to be involved in business. My dad was in business. I never wanted to be involved in a farm, but I always appreciated growing up in a farm. And if I ever made enough money, I wanted to live on a farm. I wanted to recreate that kind of upbringing for my kids. I have 4 kids, okay. 12, 11 next week, 8 and 7.
But you tell them they could make money out of farming, could they?
No, I think it's very important to be a real... The only way to make money out of farming is have a big income stream from some other activity and then go farming.
Veganism and vegetarianism, how is that going down at home?
It's a fad. It's a fad and it's a nonsense.
Is it going to threaten farming in any way?
No. You look at the explosion of the world population. We're going to need to be able to produce more and more food. Mm-hmm. Meat is certainly one of the greatest sources of protein. There is no way that the world is going to live or turn to either a vegan diet or to a vegetarian diet. But there are fads that are with us at all times. Everybody should be entitled to make their own life choices. But my children's, thankfully, their favourite food is fillet steak or a fillet of beef on a Sunday. No, it's Angus. We don't eat Herefords. We use them for shoe leather. The success of McDonald's across the world confirms what we've always known. That is, people fundamentally like and enjoy meat.
Yourself and your farm manager, Joe Manley, have said that you're hoping to court a bit more dairy trade from dairy farmers buying bulls. Are you worried now? Milk prices have gone down. A lot of dairy farmers have these big loans. Is the money going to be there to buy nice, shiny Black Angus bulls?
Generally speaking, yes, because what dairy farmers want is easy calving bulls. The obvious. There's 2 reasons for buying Angus. Certainly the Angus bulls is 1, they're easy calving on the dairy herd, and 2, you then have a crop coming along that you can sell into the certified Angus beef programme, where there's a premium for the Angus meat as well.
Is the premium big enough?
No, we all think the premium should be bigger, but I think the amount of marketing that's gone in behind Angus, if you go to the States, nobody would dream of eating Hereford or anything substandard meat like that. It's all Angus.
Charlie.
And I think that's kind of... Charlie just put in burgers. And I think that's continuing. Even the extent to which you looked at the chains like Burger King are pushing Angus beef. I mean, the marketing behind Angus beef is growing all the time. And I think consumers, particularly in supermarkets, are beginning to appreciate, the certified Angus beef.
Last year you said that you didn't think England would go ahead with Brexit, or the UK would go ahead with Brexit. Have they gone in too deep now to backpedal out of it?
I don't think so. I mean, you look at the way it is proceeding at the moment. I think it's beginning to dawn on everybody that it was a dumb decision. And even the way the British government have handled the Brexit negotiations. I mean, it seems clear that Brexit will now go ahead in March 2019, but it will have no effect because Britain is actually, the transition agreement is going to continue for at least 18 months. I think it will continue for 4 or 5 years. So they will be able to say, yes, we've technically left the European Union, but nothing has changed because we're still paying into it, we're still observing all the rules and regulations, and there's still an open border between the Republic and the North. And I think that is one of the key issues arising out of Brexit. I think in time they'll change their minds. I think they'll realise that the UK's best interest, certainly their economic interest, comes as being a member of the largest free trade area in the world and not being some remote and isolated island on the edge, on the periphery of Europe.
If I do come and decide to grace you,
if you do come,
if I do, well, I don't know.
You need to come.
Are you charging for parking or not?
No, free parking.
Free parking. It's good to hear.
Free bouncy castles, free burgers, free cups of coffee.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'll consider it then. Maybe.
Even free seating. We put in seating at great expense. Tiered seating, which is free. No allocated seating.
Okay.
Says you should come. You need to raise your sights above.
Well, my sights
the
are very high
the humdrum Hereford.
Humdrum Hereford. But should I be looking out for any breeding? Are you happy with the stock this year? Do you think it's improving every year?
I have a terrific team on the farm, led by Joe Manny. We have all of the bulls, the bulls and heifers this year will be the first catalogue where they're all 5 stars. And we have focused quite heavily on the new star grading system, and then all of the stock we have for sale is 5 stars.
But you're happy with the star system?
I mean, I'm happy with the star system. I think it gives us certainly what I would call the quality produced gives us something to aim for, and it gives something that buyers can readily understand. What I dislike is the amount of times the system changes. 5 years ago we didn't have the star system. Now we have the star system. That's fine as long as we stay with the star system for another 5 or 10 years. But I don't want to change to something else in 2 years' time.
Do you get annoyed when you see the evaluations going up and down?
That's the challenge with it. It becomes difficult when you see. I mean, particularly for bulls, sires, stars going up and down. It becomes a bit more. Well, how real is this? It's somebody's evaluation. But look, if that's what customers want, if that's what dairy farmers want to see, if buying Angus bulls and heifers, we want to see 5 stars, we'll give them 5 stars. If in 3 or 4 years' time they want red Angus, we will have more red Angus. And if they want Herefords, they can go to Limerick and
buy them off me.
Buy them off you.
Hopefully the same averages that you get.
Well,
there you go.
I doubt it. There's just not that kind of quality.
I think I could, no. Averages for animals like Charolais now would be, I think it was 13,000 someone got for a Charolais bull last weekend. You said, you have 250 Angus cattle, your averages might be up if you went into Charolais. You're not.
I've never been interested in Charolais or, the big plough pullers, never been my kind of thing. A, I think they take too much management. B, they're not particularly easy breeding. The Angus are a much more native breed, easy breeding. They're gentler on the land. I think they look far more pretty than big plough pullers like Charolais or Blondes or anything else. But, lots of people went into like Charolais. They're welcome to them.
Okay, thank you very much.
So thank you.
Questions?
Sale starts at 12 o'clock.
Clearly, let's hear. So how many have you got? What date sale starts?
It's Saturday the 28th of April, so well after the Easter. We'll have probably about 30 bulls, 20 heifers, all rated 5 stars. In addition, for those who are not buyers, we will have face painting, bouncy castles, entertainment for the children. Normally we put on a kind of a show of the kind of champion horses, but at the moment, unfortunately, the sale will coincide with Punchestown this year, so they'll hopefully all be running in Punchestown. But we'll still have War of Attrition, Don Cossack and all others on parade. Joe and the team will be shampooing and washing from an early morning, and I hope everybody has a great day.
And that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. The paper will be out in shops tomorrow, but we also have Twitter, Facebook, Snapchat and pretty pictures of farm animals on Instagram to keep you going. And the Farmers Journal app is free to download. The sound engineer this week was Ferdy Mooney, and I'm Hannah Quinn Mulligan.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.